Okay, so let's talk about scaling. So first we're going to go to the Tools menu and select Scale Model. Bring up this pane. So this first row, you can name your model. Second one contains the mass information you can edit. If you haven't added a marker set, then you can click there and look and load the file. And then here, there's the actual scaling model. So you'll want to check the box for preserving the mass, and then select your static pose file that the measurements will be based off of. Next, we have the Adjust Model Markers section. Once again, we're going to select that same static pose file. The time ranges are filled in there. We'll come back to this in a minute. So we'll go to the next pane real quick, talk about where the measurements come from for that. So for each segment that you want to have measured separately, so you'll select it, and then you need to click Edit Measurement Set. You can add it, and then you will select, or you'll write what you want it to be called. Click the plus sign, and then you select the two markers that you want to be measured between. So since we're measuring the right tibia, let's say that we measure it from the right medial knee to the right medial malleolus, just for the sake. If we accidentally added an extra set in there, we don't want that, so we'll just hit that there. So we have those selected in the right medial knee and the right medial malleolus. So that's going to be what's going to be the measurement for our tibia. We'll click OK. Make sure the tibia is still selected, and then come up here, and then select that measurement set, tibia, that we just created. So now you can see over here on the right, that's the scale factor that it will be in comparison to the original model. And you do that with for all the different segments that you would like to do it with. This pane, once again, kind of like with inverse kinematics, determines to what degree certain markers are used. So that's most of it. Lastly, we have this preview static pose. So that makes it so we don't move the model markers yet. So we click that and then press run. And then what happens is we come look at here. And if you look up closely, there are two sets of markers, the pink and the blue. So the pink ones are the ones that are automatically on the model. The blue ones here are the ones that are measured. So that's what corresponds with the data that we have. And so we can see that they're pretty close, not exact, but they're pretty close to the same spot. So we know that it's going to be pretty accurate. So we can uncheck that box and select run again, and it'll move the model markers to match the position of the measurement set. So we should be good to go. We can click close, and now we have our scaled model. Okay, so you'll also notice now that you've scaled the model, you have two models that are shown here, this one right here and this one right here. This one that is now bold, I guess you could say, that is a little more solid looking, that's the current model, and that's the one that has been scaled. And this one over here, the one that's kind of faded, kind of translucent, that's the original model. You can also look at them over here. The one that is higher up, that started up there, that is not bolded, that one is the original model. And this one down here that is bolded, it's lower down, and that has static pose next or within it, that is our scaled model. And that's the one that we want to keep. It's kind of confusing to keep two models there showing at the same time, and so we probably want just one of them showing. And so we can go up here to this one that is the original model, the non-scaled model. We can right click on it and then go to display and hide it, and so then we won't see it anymore. Or alternatively, you can simply close it altogether, and then it just will not be there, and that's also fine. Sometimes it may ask you if you want to save changes to it. That's not really necessary since you have your scaled model, so you can go ahead and click no. So that's kind of just one extra little thing with scaling. Okay, just a few more comments on scaling real quick. Second, so just so you are aware, the scaling that you did for this model, so for example changing weights or changing length segments, that will continue to be used for as long as you use that model. So for example, if if you want to do, inverse kinematics and computed muscle control and a bunch of different analyses um, for the same subject, then if you do not go back and rescale the model, then its default is to keep the new scaled measurements with that model. Same applies if you do, a different analysis. So for example, say you did one walking trial, you did all the analyses for it, and then you have a second walking trial that you want to do as well, but it's for that same subject. It's just a different trial. Unless you tell it otherwise, it will keep the same scale factors and weights that you've added into this scaled model. It'll assume that it's the same subject. You also have to be careful with that, though, that if you switch subjects, so if you start analyzing a file that is a file for a different subject, you will need to go back and rescale it for that individual subject so it's the proper mass and has the proper lengths, etc. Oh, also, I want to go back really quickly and talk just a little bit more about this scale factors pane. I don't think I was necessarily super clear with how this works. So the point of this pane is to change the length of certain body segments in order to better fit the actual length of a certain subject. So for example, if somebody's femur is a little bit longer than someone's normally is, then we can take that into account here, and that will and then modify how the mass is distributed, and that may change some of the calculations a little bit. So you notice that this number over here, that's the scale factor, and so it's set at 1 right now, which means that the length that it assigns to that body segment is 1 times as big as the default, or as the generic model. And when we go in and change one of these, editing the measurement set and saying, okay, we want it to be between this set of markers or whatever, we will get a different number here. So I think when we put it in before, it was like 0.97 roughly. So that means that it'll be 0.97 times the size of the generic model. So that means that body segment will be slightly smaller than the generic model. That then changes the length and to some degree the weight distribution of that body segment. Specifically, which segments you modify, or if you modify the length of any at all, is completely up to you. Just depends on the study you're doing. For example, in our study, we are working primarily with the lower body, so we don't really care at all about rearranging the lengths of anything with any of the arm segments or anything like that. And even as far as the legs go, the only ones that will really make a huge difference as far as we're concerned are going to be the femur and the tibia for each individual leg. And so for our specific study, all that we're going to change are the measurements for the femur and the tibia of the right leg, and the femur and the tibia of the left leg. Doing that same process that we demonstrated before. So editing the measurement set, naming it, and then adding a pair of markers that will then designate the length of that segment according to our measurements. And so that's just a little extra thing for scaling, just so hopefully that makes a little bit more sense as to how this works, what the scale factor pane is for, and what it is.